They called it education. I called it erasure. For 20 years, I lived as Sarah Mitchell, the name they gave me when they took my real one. I wore their corsets, read their books, spoke their English without accent. I was their success story. The savage child civilized. The proof that their methods worked. I set one plate for breakfast every morning in my Boston boarding house. 1 cup for coffee. 1 chair at the table. The arithmetic of alone. I'd gotten good at it. Perfected it. Really, being alone was safer than the alternative. They cut my hair and called it grooming. Burned my clothes and called it charity. Forbade my language and called it education. For 20 years, I believed them. Or pretended to. Sometimes I couldn't tell the difference anymore. The letter arrived on a Tuesday morning in April 1886. Spring in Boston meant cold rain and gray skies, nothing like the springs I remembered from childhood. Nothing like home. But I'd stopped calling it that years ago. Home was where you belonged. I belonged nowhere. The envelope came from a missionary I'd known briefly. A woman who'd visited the Apache lands. Her handwriting was shaky. Urgent. Inside. 3 pages detailed the Army's new relocation plan. My birth tribe, my people were being moved to a reservation in Oklahoma. She included statistics. Mortality rates, 30% dead within the first year from disease, starvation, heartbreak. My hands started shaking. Coffee spilled across the table, dark liquid spreading like blood. Apache words surfaced in my mind. Unbidden after years of silence. Words I thought I'd forgotten. Words they'd beaten out of me with rulers and shame. I was 6 years old when the soldiers came. I remembered the raid in fragments, shouting, smoke, my mother's screams. They called it saving me. Told me I was lucky. Lucky to be rescued from savagery. Lucky to receive civilization. Lucky to forget. But you can't erase blood. They tried. For 20 years. They tried. I counted the years sometimes. When sleep wouldn't come, 7,300 days. I'd stopped counting after the first 100. When the numbers became too heavy to carry, started again that morning. The letter trembling in my hands. I stared at my reflection in the window. A stranger looked back. Pale dress buttoned to the throat. Hair pinned severely. Skin that had forgotten the sun. This was what they'd wanted, a brown woman bleached of culture, scrubbed of heritage, molded into their image of acceptable. I'd become their weapon. Time to turn the blade around. The decision came like lightning sudden, illuminating, inevitable. I was 26 years old. I was educated. I spoke perfect English. I understood how the white world worked its laws, its loopholes, its lies. They'd spent 2 decades teaching me their system. Never occurred to them I might use it against them. I booked passage west that afternoon. The boarding house mistress asked where I was going. Home. I told her. The word felt strange in my mouth. Foreign and familiar. Both. She looked confused. I thought you were from here. No, I said. I was made here. I'm from somewhere else entirely. The journey west stripped away 20 years with every mile. I watched through the train window as buildings gave way to fields, fields to plains, plains to the landscape that lived in my dreams. My pulse quickened. My breath shortened. Each day, traveling. I felt younger and more terrified. I practiced Apache words like prayers. My tongue stumbled over sounds that should have been home, should have been instinct. 20 years was a long time to forget how to speak your own name. When I finally reached the camp, I stood at the edge for an hour before walking in, preparing myself, steeling myself, lying to myself that I was ready for this. The place was familiar and foreign, both. Smaller than I remembered, poorer. The dwellings looked weathered, patched with whatever materials they could find. Children played in the dust, too thin, wearing a mix of traditional and cast-off white clothing. My heart cracked, seeing them. Seeing myself. I'd prepared for soldiers, for legal battles, for bureaucratic fights. I hadn't prepared for this, my own heart breaking at the sight of home I couldn't claim. I walked into camp wearing my Boston dress, my civilized face, my perfect English posture. Children stopped playing to stare. Women paused their work to watch. Men's eyes followed me with suspicion. I was just another white woman to them, come to preach or pity or promise things she wouldn't deliver. An elder stepped forward, tall, weathered, eyes sharp as obsidian. He studied me with the kind of attention that missed nothing. Later, I'd learn his name was Dakota. Later, I'd learn he was my mother's brother, my uncle. But in that moment, he was just a wall between me and everything I'd lost. "State your business," he said in English, sharp, protective. I opened my mouth. Apache words came out broken, childish. "I am daughter." My voice cracked on the word. I sounded like a child, felt like one. Maybe that was right. Maybe I needed to become 6 years old again to find my way back. "Whose daughter?" he asked, testing me. I pointed. My hand shook. "Her daughter." My mother stood near a cook fire, stirring something in a pot. She looked up at my voice. Our eyes met across the camp. 20 years collapsed and expanded simultaneously. She looked older, worn, beautiful in ways I'd forgotten beauty could exist. Tired in ways that made my chest hurt. She looked at me with polite distance. The expression reserved for strangers, for white women who came bearing good intentions and bad outcomes. No recognition, no memory, nothing. I'd prepared for rejection, for anger, for doors slammed in my face. I hadn't prepared for this being looked through, being seen and not known. Being invisible to the one person who should have known me in the dark. Anyone can claim to be someone's lost child. Dakota said. His voice wasn't cruel, just careful. Prove it. They gave me 3 days, 72 hours to prove 20 years of absence hadn't erased me. Arithmetic again. Always arithmetic. Numbers were easier than emotions. Counting was safer than feeling. The council decided my fate in Apache. I understood maybe half the words, enough to know I was on trial, enough to know I might lose. Dakota was assigned as my guardian, to watch me. He said, to judge my claims, to protect the tribe from whatever trick this might be. He didn't say the last part out loud. Didn't need to. I saw it in his eyes. We sat outside the camp circle that first night, not welcomed in, not sent away, existing in the space between. "Tell me about the daughter you claim to be," he said. I took a breath, reached back through 20 years of forced forgetting. I fell at the creek when I was 4, cut my knee on a rock. I pulled up my skirt to show the scar, white and old against my skin. My mother carried me home, sang to me while she cleaned the wound. He studied the scar. His expression didn't change. She sang a lullaby about the stars. I continued. My voice steadied as the memories surfaced. 3 verses. I only remember 2. "What was the first line?" he asked. I sang it badly. In broken Apache that probably murdered the pronunciation, but the melody was right. The melody my tongue remembered even when my mind forgot. His eyes flickered. Something shifted in his face. Not acceptance, not yet, but possibility. My mother listened from 50 feet away. I felt her attention like heat. She didn't approach, didn't speak, just listened while pretending not to. I understood. I'd spent 20 years pretending to. That night, sleeping on the ground outside the camp circle, I counted stars and tried to remember the third verse, somewhere in the darkness. Someone was watching. I felt it. Hoped it was my mother. Feared it wasn't. The next morning, Dakota brought me coffee, bitter and strong. The way I'd forgotten coffee could taste when it wasn't drowning in cream and sugar. "You have 2 days left," he said. Then, quieter, almost gentle, "Your mother asked what the scar on your knee looked like." I looked up at him, saw something in his face that might have been kindness, might have been hope, might have been the beginning of belief. "Tell her," I said. "It looks like a half moon. Tell her I remember that she said the creek spirit kissed me there, marked me as beloved." He studied me for a long moment, then nodded, walked away carrying my words like an offering. I sat alone with my coffee and my memories, excavating childhood, digging through 20 years of deliberately buried moments. Each memory I found felt like finding pieces of myself I'd thought were burned. The truth was simple. I'd spent 2 decades learning to be someone else. Now I had 48 hours to remember who I really was. The sun rose higher. I closed my eyes and reached for the third verse of the lullaby. Somewhere in my mother's voice, somewhere in the melody of childhood, somewhere in the place where blood remembers what the mind forgets, I knew it was waiting. My hands remembered weaving before my mind did. A week passed. Then 2. My 3 days became Traditions Day until proven otherwise. Nobody sent me away. Nobody welcomed me in. I existed in the space between, and slowly, that space began to feel like belonging. Each morning, I woke expecting exile. Each evening, I slept a little closer to the camp circle. Dakota became my unlikely teacher. He corrected my Apache with patience I didn't deserve, showed me traditional ways I'd forgotten, didn't mock when I fumbled, didn't praise when I succeeded, just taught. Steady and persistent, like teaching itself was a form of faith. I helped with daily work, awkward at first. My Boston soft hands blistered, then calloused. My body remembered rhythms my mind had forgotten. Carrying water, preparing food, weaving baskets from materials that felt familiar against my palms. Muscle memory ran deeper than forced forgetting. In return, I shared what I knew. Legal rights under federal treaties. How to write formal letters to government officials. The bureaucratic loopholes that might save them. I spread documents across the ground papers I'd brought from Boston. Research I'd done. Ammunition collected from their own laws. Dakota listened with the kind of attention that saw through words to meaning. Asked smart questions. Understood faster than I expected. "You're teaching us their language," he said one afternoon, studying a legal document. "I'm teaching you their weapons," I corrected. He smiled. First time I'd seen it. "Good." He watched me like I might disappear. Maybe he feared I was a ghost. Maybe I feared the same thing. Ghosts of who we'd been, trying to become real again in each other's presence. The children approached cautiously at first, curious about the white Apache woman. They asked questions in that fearless way children have. "Why do you talk funny? What's Boston? Are you really one of us?" I answered honestly. Showed them both worlds. Taught them Apache words I was relearning. Taught them English words that might protect them. We traded languages like gifts, building bridges between the stolen and the staying. My mother watched from distance, still silent, but closer than before. I felt her attention, like sunlight. Warm, but not quite touching. Sometimes Dakota brought me herbs without explanation. I recognized them later, my mother's favorites, the ones she used for cooking. He was building a bridge between us, one small kindness at a time. Each Apache word I relearned felt like finding pieces of myself I thought were burned. Scar tissue over wounds opening to reveal what never really healed underneath. My tongue loosened with practice. The sounds came easier, not fluent, not yet. But less foreign, more home, more mine. The camp had rhythms I'd forgotten existed. Morning routines that didn't require clocks. Evening gatherings that didn't require invitations. A way of moving through time that felt circular instead of linear. Present instead of rushing. I'd spent 20 years living by schedules and deadlines. Here, time moved differently. Slower. Deeper. Real? 2 weeks became 3. The night Dakota sat beside me at the fire instead of across from it. I knew something had shifted. Not acceptance, not quite, but proximity. The kind that suggested possibility. Tell me about the law that protects us, he said. Not if, not might, us. I looked at him, saw my uncle in his features, saw family in the way he'd quietly, persistently made space for me, saw hope in how he said us, like I was already included. So I told him. About treaty rights and federal obligations, about legal precedents and constitutional protections, about every weapon their system had given me that I could turn in our defense. He listened, understood, believed. That night, sleeping inside the camp circle for the first time, I heard the sky differently. Heard the stories my mother used to tell me about stars. Heard the third verse of the lullaby rising from memory like dawn. I wasn't home yet, but I could see it from here. The child's crying woke the camp. I lay in the darkness, listening to women trying to soothe her. Soft voices. Gentle words. Nothing worked. The child's sobs cut through the night, raw and inconsolable. I knew that sound. I'd made it once, 20 years ago, when everything I knew was torn away. The melody rose from somewhere deeper than memory, from blood, from bone, from the 6-year-old who never really left. I started singing before I decided to. The lullaby. My mother's lullaby. The one about sky horses and beloved children and being too precious to be stepped on. My voice cracked on the first words, steadied on the second verse. Found certainty on the third, the verse I'd remembered 3 nights ago. Lying under the same stars my mother used to sing about. The camp went silent. I sang and remembered being small, being safe, being her daughter without having to prove it. The words came back perfect, like they'd been waiting 20 years in my throat for permission to emerge. When I finished, the child had quieted. The camp stayed silent. I opened my eyes. My mother stood on the other side of the fire, just stood there, staring. Then she walked around the flames and sat across from me. First time choosing proximity. First time closing distance between us. I only sang it to you, she said, in Apache. 4 words. Clear and careful. The third verse. I never taught anyone else. My throat closed. Tears I'd been holding for 20 years pressed against my eyes. I know. How do you know it? You sang it until dawn. I was 4. Thunder scared me. I couldn't sleep. She leaned forward, Firelight caught the tears on her face. What did I tell you? Thunder was the sky horses running. The memory was so clear, it hurt. You said they wouldn't step on me because I was too precious. Her hand rose to her mouth. She breathed in sharp, made a sound between a sob and a laugh. I told you that so you wouldn't be afraid. I was afraid anyway, I said, but I believed you. Silence stretched between us, not empty, full, loaded with 20 years of absence and the fragile, terrifying possibility of return. When you were born, she said slowly, I wove you a blanket, small, blue and white. I wrapped you in it every night until they took me. I finished. She nodded. Couldn't speak. Just nodded. I'd prepared for questions, for tests, for more proving. I hadn't prepared for this. My mother looking at me and finally seeing her daughter instead of a stranger. I kept it, she whispered. The blanket, 20 years. Every night I folded it, waited. The weight of being waited for, of being worth keeping a blanket for, of being precious enough that my mother counted the same days I did, just from the other side of absence. Mama, I said, the Apache word for mother, hadn't said it in 20 years. She stood, walked around the fire, sat beside me, pulled me against her shoulder the way she used to when I was small. Her hand stroked my hair longer now than when they'd cut it, but still not traditional length. Still marked by what they'd done. My daughter, she said. My daughter came back. I let myself cry. First time since returning. First time in years. Maybe first time since I was 6. I cried, and she held me, and somewhere in the darkness, Dakota stood watch to give us privacy. The song remembered me when my mother couldn't. The melody held what words had forgotten. The lullaby was the bridge that carried me home. That night, sleeping beside my mother for the first time in 2 decades. I heard her whisper the words she'd whispered when I was small. Sleep, daughter. The sky horses won't step on you. After 20 years, I was too precious. They came 4 weeks early. I was helping my mother prepare food when the lookout's whistle cut through morning air. 3 sharp bursts. Danger. Soldiers. The camp erupted into controlled chaos. Children hidden. Elders gathering. Men checking weapons they hoped not to use. Fear rippling through in waves. I stood and looked toward the ridge. Blue coats. 6 of them. Army scouts sent ahead to survey before the main relocation force arrived. My mother's hand caught my arm. Stay quiet. Stay safe. I looked at her. Saw fear in her eyes. Not for herself. For me. Still protecting me. Even now. Even when I'd come back specifically to protect her. No, I said gently. It's my turn. I walked toward the approaching soldiers. My heart hammered. My hands shook. But my voice would be steady. I'd practiced being steady for 20 years. Dakota fell into step beside me. You don't have to do this alone. I'm not alone, I said. Felt the weight of the camp behind me. Felt my mother watching. Felt 20 years of forced education becoming something useful. Something good. I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. The soldiers stopped at the camp edge. Their leader, a lieutenant with a sunburned face and eyes that had seen too much, looked at me with surprise. A woman. An educated-looking woman. Not what he'd expected. I'm Lieutenant Morrison, he said. We're here to survey the relocation site. You're 4 weeks early, I said in perfect English. Boston accent clipped and precise. The official timeline states 6 weeks notification before survey. You're in violation of federal protocol. He blinked, looked at Dakota. Back to me. Confused? I'll speak for us. I continued. My pulse raced, but my voice stayed level. We speak together, Dakota said in both Apache and English, standing beside me, not in front, not behind. Beside, Morrison's expression hardened. You can't speak for these people. You're not one of them. The words hit like a slap. 20 years of that same dismissal, too white for Apache, too Apache for whites, belonging nowhere, being nothing. But I wasn't nothing. Not anymore. I speak English because you forced me to, I said, each word deliberate, each word a weapon. I speak Apache because I was born to, which makes me exactly one of them. The relocation order is final, he said. Then explain why the Indian Rights Association is reviewing your mortality rates. I stepped forward, pulled papers from my pocket, documentation I'd prepared, evidence I'd gathered. Explain why 3 congressmen are asking questions about the 30% death rate at the Oklahoma reservation. Explain why your final order has 8 legal challenges pending in federal court. I handed him the documents, watched his face change as he read. Confusion, concern, the first crack in certainty. This woman doesn't represent you, he said to Dakota. Desperate now, trying to regain control. She is family, Dakota answered. Calm? Sure. She speaks our truth in your language. That is representation. My mother's voice came from behind me. She is my daughter. I turned. She stood there, small and fierce, facing the soldiers who'd taken me 20 years ago, stolen from me, come back to save us. You will listen. Her hand settled on my shoulder. Physical claiming. Public acknowledgement. The mother who'd spent 20 years waiting, standing with the daughter who'd spent 20 years finding her way back. Morrison looked between us, saw the resemblance he'd missed before, saw the truth he couldn't dismiss, saw that their weapon, their education, their civilization, their forced assimilation had turned against them. I need to speak with my commanding officer, he said finally. You have 2 weeks. I told him, not 6, not 4, 2. I'll have additional documentation prepared, I'll have legal representation arranged, and I'll have every newspaper between here and Washington ready to print the story of how the Army kills Apache children through relocation and calls it progress. He stared at me, saw something that made him uncomfortable, maybe saw himself, maybe saw what civilization looked like when you stripped away the lies. They left. The camp stayed silent until the blue coats disappeared over the ridge. Then noise exploded. Some celebrated, some argued, some feared I'd made things worse. I stood in the center and felt both Apache and outsider, both savior and stranger, both vindicated and terrified I couldn't deliver what I'd promised. My mother's hand stayed on my shoulder. Dakota stood beside me. In that moment, I wasn't alone. Whatever came next, I wouldn't face it alone. That night, my mother invited me into her dwelling for the first time. We didn't speak, just sat together, 2 coffee cups between us, watching firelight dance on walls. After 20 years, I was daughter enough to share her silence. 2 weeks until the final hearing. 14 days. 336 hours. I couldn't sleep. The weight crushed me in the darkness. What if my legal arguments failed? What if federal law meant nothing against military orders? What if I'd given them hope just to watch it die? I'd learned to run in white society, run from questions about my past, run from mirrors that showed a face I didn't recognize, run from any feeling that required staying. Running was survival until it became prison. Now I needed to stay, to fight, to deliver on promises I wasn't sure I could keep. I packed my bag in the darkness, quiet, careful, not wanting to wake anyone. Better to disappear than to fail in front of them. Better to return to Boston, where I understood the rules, where expectations were low, where I could survive alone. Where will you run to? Dakota's voice. He sat in the shadows outside the dwelling, watching, always watching. Back to Boston, I said, where I understand the rules. You hate Boston. I hate failing more. He stood, walked closer, sat beside my packed bag, didn't speak for a long moment. Just sat there, comfortable in silence the way he was comfortable in everything. You haven't failed, he said finally. You've given us weapons we didn't have knowledge, documentation, hope. Hope is dangerous when you can't deliver. Hopelessness is guaranteed death. You gave us a chance to fight. That's not nothing. I looked at him. My uncle, my teacher, my steady presence in a world that felt constantly unstable. What if I'm not enough? What if you don't have to be? He leaned back, looked at the stars. What if you just have to be here? The simple truth of it cut through my panic. I didn't have to save everyone. Didn't have to fix everything. Didn't have to be perfect. Just present. But fear ran deeper than logic. 20 years I survived by trusting no one, needing nothing, expecting less. I whispered, now I need to be everything for everyone. I'm not enough. Never was. Never would be. He nodded. Didn't argue. Let the fear exist between us. My mother appeared from the darkness. Silent the way she'd learned to be. She sat on my other side. Brought something with her, a small woven blanket. Faded. Worn. Precious. I made this when you were born, she said, unfolded it carefully. Wrapped you in it every night. I touched it. Texture flooding memory. Smell I'd forgotten I knew. Safety woven into thread. You kept it. 20 years. Every night I folded it. Waited. The weight of being waited for. Of being worth a 20-year vigil. Of being precious enough that my absence was felt every single night. Her hand covered mine. You came back. Everything else. We faced together. I counted the ways I didn't belong. Too white for them. Too Apache for whites. Too educated to fit in. Too broken to lead. Arithmetic of inadequacy that never quite balanced. But maybe math wasn't the right language for belonging. Maybe some things couldn't be counted. Maybe family wasn't arithmetic. Maybe home wasn't a calculation you solved. Maybe it was just showing up. Being present. Staying when running felt safer. I unpacked slowly. Each item returned to its place felt like a vow. I would stay. I would fight. I would fail or succeed, but I'd do it here, with my people, as my mother's daughter. I always ran. I said quietly, never fought. Running was the 6-year-old strategy. You're 26 now, Dakota said. Time to learn a new one. I finished. My mother wrapped the childhood blanket around my shoulders. It smelled like her, like memory, like everything I'd lost and was slowly, painfully reclaiming that night, lying between my mother and my uncle. I understood something. The running was finished. The standing had begun. Whatever happened in 2 weeks, victory or defeat, success or failure, I'd face it standing here, standing with them, standing as myself, whole and fractured and trying, always trying to bridge the impossible gap between who I'd been and who I'd become. For the first time in 20 years, that felt like enough. Dawn came cold and clear. My mother braided my hair traditionally. Her hands worked steady, weaving in the patterns of our people. Each pull of hair felt like reclamation. Each braid a statement. This is who I am. She wrapped her best shawl around my shoulders, blue and white. The colors of the blanket she'd kept, the colors of sky horses and beloved daughters. You are my daughter, she said. You are Apache. You are educated. You are all of these. You are enough. I wore both worlds that morning, her shawl over my shoulders, legal documents in my hands, Apache words in my heart, English precision on my tongue. Not divided, integrated. Dakota and 3 elders accompanied me. I led, they supported. We traveled to the fort in silence, each lost in our own thoughts. The hearing room smelled like tobacco and old wood. Army officers sat on one side, government officials on the other. I stood in the middle with my people behind me and 2 decades of forced education ready to become. Ammunition. Lieutenant Morrison was there. His commanding officer, Captain Harris, gray-haired and stone-faced, sat at the center. Men who'd decided our fate before we arrived. Men who expected compliance, expected defeat. They didn't expect me. I presented my case systematically. Mortality data from the Oklahoma reservation. Legal precedents protecting tribal rights. Constitutional violations in the relocation order. Treaty obligations the government was ignoring. Federal health codes they were breaking. Every law they'd taught me became ammunition. Every lesson in their civilization became evidence of their hypocrisy. They'd educated me to forget my people. I'd educated myself to save them. I spoke for an hour. Document after document, fact after fact. Building a case so airtight that dismissing it would require admitting corruption. Captain Harris listened with a face like granite. When I finished, he leaned back. Miss Mitchell, your emotional connection to these people compromises your objectivity. The old dismissal, the familiar weapon. You're too close, too invested, too Apache to be trusted. I met his eyes. Captain Harris, I was 6 years old when your soldiers took me. They cut my hair, burned my traditional clothing, forbade my language. They called it saving me from savagery. I switched to Apache, spoke to my people sitting behind me, told them I loved them, told them I was fighting for them, told them we would win. Back to English. For 20 years, I became what you wanted educated. English-speaking, civilized. I believed your lies about savage Indians needing rescue. I believed I was better off stolen from my family. I believed civilization was salvation. I pulled off the shawl. Let them see me clearly. But you can't erase blood with scissors and schooling. When I learned you planned to relocate my people to a reservation where 30% died in the first year from disease, from starvation, from heartbreak, something you tried to cut out of me came back. I spread my documentation across the table. I've documented 18 violations of treaty rights, 12 health code failures, and 7 instances of fraud in land allocation. Your relocation procedures are illegal, and I can prove it. An official spoke. Where did you learn all this? I smiled, cold, sharp, exact. You taught me. 20 years in your schools. I learned your law, your constitution, your language. You made me into your weapon. I'm using it to defend my people. The room went silent. I stood between 2 worlds, Apache shawl at my feet, legal papers in front of me, my mother behind me. The soldiers ahead of me, being exactly what I'd always been both. Neither. All of it, simultaneously. The question isn't whether I'm objective, I said quietly. The question is whether you're willing to kill more Apache children and call it progress. Because that's what this relocation order does. It kills. And I have the documentation to prove it. And I have 3 newspapers ready to print the story. And I have 2 congressmen ready to investigate. And I have the legal standing to challenge every single decision you make. I leaned forward. So decide, Captain, follow the law or break it publicly. The moment stretched, seconds feeling like hours. My heart hammered. My hands shook under the table where they couldn't see. But my voice stayed steady. My eyes didn't waver. Captain Harris looked at his documents, looked at me, looked at the trap I'd built from their own laws. The relocation order is suspended, he said finally. Pending investigation into the conditions at the Oklahoma reservation and review of treaty obligations. Suspended. Not canceled. Not reversed. Just suspended. It was enough. For now, I stood before my people and the officers, spoke clearly in both languages. I'm staying. I'll be your advocate, your translator, your bridge to their legal system. They tried to make me forget I was Apache. Instead, they taught me how to protect us. I choose to stay. I choose to fight. I choose my people. My mother's hand found mine, squeezed. Pride and love and 20 years of waiting finally fulfilled. Walking out of that hearing room with Dakota and the elders, I felt her shawl on my shoulders and my father's courage in my spine. For the first time in 20 years, all the pieces of me pointed the same direction. Home. 6 months later, I woke before dawn. Old habit, new meaning. I rose quiet, made coffee the way my mother taught me the way I'd forgotten in Boston. Set 2 cups out without thinking. Sometimes Dakota joined me. Sometimes my mother. Sometimes I drank both and remembered when 1 cup was all I could imagine. The camp stirred to life around me. Children's voices, morning fires, the sound of my language, our language spoken freely in the open air. No shame, no fear. No soldiers coming to forbid it. My dwelling sat in the center of the camp circle now. Not the edge, not outside. Center. Where I could see everyone. Where everyone could find me. Because they did find me. Daily, questions about legal documents. Help translating government letters. Teaching children to write their names in English while my mother taught them traditional stories in Apache. My hands knew 2 kinds of work now. Weaving baskets in the morning, writing legal briefs in the afternoon. Both mine, both me, both necessary. The children gathered as the sun rose. 8 of them, ranging from 6 to 14. They sat in a circle around me the way students had sat around teachers in Boston. But this was different. This was mine. Tell us the story, the youngest asked. She was 6. Same age I'd been. My mother smiled from the fire. This had become ritual. Morning lessons mixing both worlds. Once there were sky horses. I began in Apache, the traditional story, the one my mother used to tell me. Then I translated to English, then back to Apache. Teaching them to move between languages the way I'd had to relearn. Why do we need both? One of the older children asked. I looked at him, saw myself in his question. Our stories teach us who we are. Their language teaches us how to protect who we are. We need both to survive. We need both to thrive. I taught them to write their Apache names in English letters. Taught them their legal rights under federal law. Taught them the treaties their ancestors had signed. Taught them to be proud of both worlds they'd have to navigate. Dakota joined us as the lesson ended. We had a council meeting later. More documentation to prepare, more letters to write. The fight hadn't ended with the suspension, just paused. We had to keep pressure constant. Keep proving we were worth protecting. "Ready?" he asked. I nodded. We worked well together now. Partners in this strange bridge-building work. He understood Apache needs. I understood white bureaucracy. Together, we managed to protect our people more than either could alone. Whether romance would ever bloom between us, I didn't know. Didn't need to know. Right now, we had purpose. Had partnership. Had respect. The rest could wait. My mother called me to help with cooking. We worked in comfortable silence, speaking sometimes in Apache, sometimes in English. She was learning my language the way I'd relearned hers, building bridges from both sides. "I grieved you for 20 years, she said quietly, stirring the pot. "Now I get to know you again. The girl I lost and the woman who came back." I leaned against her shoulder. I grieved myself. Now I get to be both. The child you lost and the woman who returned. We cooked together, taught together, lived together, mother and daughter, rebuilding what soldiers had tried to destroy. That evening, I sat in my dwelling surrounded by both worlds. The childhood blanket on my bed. Legal documents stacked on a table. Traditional tools beside writing instruments. Apache clothing and Boston dresses hanging together. People asked me which I was, Apache or white, traditional or educated, daughter or advocate. I told them I was the bridge, the both, the woman who was stolen, and the woman who came back, the child they tried to erase and the weapon they accidentally forged, my mother's daughter speaking my father's language in my enemy's words. I was exactly who I needed to be. I didn't know what tomorrow would bring. More legal battles, more translation, more teaching children to live in two worlds without losing themselves in either. But I knew this. You can't erase blood. You can try to cut it out, burn it away, forbid it from speaking. But blood remembers. Blood persists. Blood comes home. And I was home. Finally, fully, free. Not because I'd chosen one world over another, but because I'd learned to stand in both. To use my forced education as a weapon for my people. To take the pain of 20 years and transform it into protection. To be stolen and return. To be broken and whole. To be daughter and warrior. Both. I'd spent so long thinking I had to choose. Had to pick sides. Had to be one thing or another. But the truth was simpler and harder. I was everything. All the fractured pieces, all the contradictory parts, the Apache child and the educated woman, the stolen girl and the returning daughter, the 6-year-old who couldn't stop them from taking her, and the 26-year-old who could stop them from taking anyone else outside. Stars emerged, the same stars my mother had sung about. The same sky horses that wouldn't step on me because I was too precious. I was still precious, still beloved, still exactly who I was always meant to be. Just took me 20 years and 1,000 miles to find my way back to believing it.